Let's talk about the IPO market, because you had Reddit and you had Astera Labs out this week, and they weren't enormous IPOs, but the narrative that I keep hearing is that they're important as temperature checks, that you have basically the CEOs of other companies that are in the pipeline really seeing how they were received in terms of whether those companies then want to go public. Curious whether you're viewing it as that way and whether your clients are as well.
Well, look, there's 38 IPOs so far this year in the US, up about 20% on last year. Clearly nothing like the volume of 2021, but there is a lot of excitement about Reddit, clearly, and the 48% bump on launch. But generally, I think a lot of excitement about the possibility of IPOs being back. Just on Reddit, by the way, I think the real story on Reddit is not the 48% bump, which is exciting, but the fact that they've licensed their data to Google. Now, why is that an interesting story? Well, the Redditors, as they're known, the people that use Reddit, the 73 million unique users a day, are not happy about the thought that their data is going to be used to train Google's large language model. And so I think it'll be very interesting to see, number one, what the licensing of data does to drive the commercial revenues of Reddit, but what it does to the sense of the Reddit community, that they feel that they're being watched and listened to as they train these models. So I think in the next few weeks that'll settle down to a narrative, and we'll see.
I mean, it seems like the FTC shares a lot of those concerns on the part of Reddit users. And of course, as we progress and you have other companies try to tap into sort of the same AI craze and try to also license out their data, it seems like this is an issue that's going to become apparent for a lot of other companies as well.
I think that's absolutely true, Katie. How the line is trodden between the applications and use and value creation of this data against the civil liberties point. And the truth is, and I see this every day as I have the privilege of sitting on a front row seat with our clients as they deal with their opportunities as well as challenges, is the winners in generative AI are going to be the people that have the best data, not the people that have the best large language models. So the richness of this data is going to be what drives value.
Well, that's fascinating, because of course not everyone can make chips, not everyone can be NVIDIA, but it's these data-rich companies that, like you said, are going to be the treasure trove. So, I mean, when you're speaking to your clients, how are they sort of weighing those concerns, data protection concerns, but also we don't want to get left behind here when it comes to AI?
Right, well, there's a couple of things for them to think about. Number one, how really do they think about the value of their data? This is an asset that typically isn't even on their balance sheet, but they're waking up to the fact that this could be possibly their most valuable asset. How do they navigate between the regulatory requirements on the one hand, but also what the reaction is of their stakeholders as they understand that their data is being used? I think it requires a really acute focus by management teams to understand how to navigate through that. But the opportunity for management teams is not the efficiency plays, which is talked about a lot, call centers and insight. The real opportunity is in growth, how to use the insight from data, how to use that to drive growth. That's where the winners are going to be.
And I'm also curious to hear in general terms how CEOs are feeling about AI, because I was speaking to a panel of 4 economists yesterday, and they were all very optimistic about AI from a productivity standpoint. Of course, what that means for the labor market. If you talk to maybe some of the workers in the labor market, they wouldn't feel quite as optimistic. What is the mood music in the C-suite when it comes to AI? Is it an opportunity or is it a risk?
So it's so interesting, Katie. We do a survey every year. We interview about 3,200 CEOs in the major economies. And one of the questions we ask them is, what do they see as their biggest opportunity, and what do they see as their biggest challenge? I thought their biggest challenge was going to be AI. In fact, it was their #1 opportunity. So generally, there's excitement about the possibility, the excitement about how to, yes, become more efficient, but also how to use these tools and their data to drive growth. I sometimes joke that our disruption index is really the anxiety index. We feel the anxiety of CEOs as they sort of try and focus on these multiple opportunities and challenges, but clearly AI is at the center of their vision.
Well, my natural next question has to be, what was seen as the biggest challenge?
Well, interestingly enough, not just in the US, but globally, the biggest challenge was seen as the US elections, the worry about what's going to happen to global security in particular, disruption to supply chains, geopolitical issues as a result of the election, and then a cascade of all the usual suspects, geopolitical issues, of course, being very high on the agenda.
Well, let's also talk, of course, about inflation, because I mean, that feels like it's on the minds of everyone. And it's interesting, of course, we had a Fed meeting this week, a Fed decision in addition to the Reddit IPO. And this is something we were just talking about earlier in the program, that you take a look at the long run dot, it was raised to 2.6%. It seems like higher for longer. We're actually going to enter into that environment. What does that mean for companies? What does that mean for how they finance themselves, of course, interest costs, but also refinancing costs?
Well, it's so interesting about the inflation numbers, of course. The Fed's very focused on trying to get it down to 2%. They've said that rates will come down, interest rates will come down, but not very soon. When you talk to commentators, Steve Schwartzman is a leading one, of course, about the cost of rents in the US, and rents, of course, make up about a third of the consumer price index, which everybody's staring at. Schwartzman says, and of course he's probably through his funds almost certainly the largest owner of rental properties in the US, he's saying that already the inflation rate for rents is somewhere between 0 and 1%, significantly lower than the CPI numbers are showing, which he argues are 6 months out of date. So I think in real terms, inflation is coming down. It serves the Fed, I think, to use the published numbers and keep cautious for longer, but rates are clearly going to come down. So what does that mean for business leaders? What it means is that the medium-term view is that rates will reduce. It makes them more confident about business conditions, make them more confident about refinancing costs. And so I think generally it builds on the optimism that we saw coming into this year.
So does that imply that maybe we aren't going to see that big wave of defaults as, you know, some were predicting this time last year?
I think so. I mean, when you look at the amount of speculative grade debt that's maturing this year and next, of course, it's pretty frightening. In truth, much of that will get pushed back. It'll get extended. I don't think we're going to see the crisis that some people were predicting last year.
And before I let you go, I do want to talk about the business of AlixPartners, because on the consulting front, of course, you compete with the likes of McKinsey, Bain, EY, and they're going through layoffs. They're talking about restructuring, et cetera. Are those conversations happening at AlixPartners in this environment? Well,
interesting. We had very strong growth last year. We have strong growth so far this year too. Why is that? Well, it's a choppy market out there. We're known for dealing with, you know, complex issues, urgent issues, big challenges, as well as big opportunities. And so actually the phone is ringing. So we haven't seen those conditions. We're kept pretty busy at the moment.